we'll do some introductions to the user group. I'm going to cover a few upcoming events. Then we'll have our discussion panel. And at the end, we'll conclude with a raffle. The raffle will be, again, based on the list of people we get from you checking in. So please either scan the QR code or go to the short link. That said, I'll turn it over to Rich.
0.79 miles.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you everybody for joining us. How many of you are from the Chicagoland area? All right. How many of you are from not the Chicagoland area? All right. So, thank you for coming, and we hope you get something out of this. So a little bit about who we are. We're a kind of a volunteer group. There's 4 of us that organize this, and our goal when we started this was to help companies, individuals with their journey from not Office 365 to Office 365. And when we figured when we started this thing that people would come and go as they started on their journey, and when they got their adoption and everything was running smooth, they would leave us. And what we learned as we went through this is that Office 365 is continuing to evolve, right? For those of you who look at the Message Center every week, right, or are heavily involved, you'll see that new features, enhancements are constantly rolling out. So what we're finding is that people continue to stay with us because we're constantly working on adoption. Our goal is not to be all technical. We try to cater to every part of the adoption process, from the IT people to the corporate communications, learning and development, right? Change management. So we try to hit all aspects, and our panelists will reflect that as well with their talks here as well. As I said, there were 4 of us that volunteer and keep this running. We meet every 2 months. For those of you in the Chicagoland area, we meet every other meeting is either downtown or in the suburbs. We try to rotate so everybody can make it. For those of you who are out of state, feel free to join our group. We do always have a Skype or Teams meeting. I guess we've evolved from Skype to Teams now for our meetings. And they vary from just general discussions to bringing in experts on different topics. So the 3 leaders that are here today, we have Larry, Michael, you've already met, and myself, Rich, and then Joe is our 4th member of our team. So with that, I think I will turn it back over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I want to briefly cover some upcoming events. And there's a lot going on. This is a short-term and long-term view. Next week, we have the Chicagoland SharePoint user group, which is a virtual user group. It's essentially online only. We meet via web meeting at lunch, and it is organized by Mark Boat. The website for it is on LinkedIn, and that's December 12th. Our next Office 365 Adoption User Group meeting is February 2nd, and we expect to have a presentation on Bing for Business as our headline presentation for that. The next SharePoint Saturday Chicago Suburbs is May the 4th. May the 4th be with you, Star Wars Day. And then looking at the bigger seasonal events, there's of course SharePoint Conference in the spring, Microsoft Ignite in the fall. I believe it's going to be November this time. And in the winter, again, we'll expect to be back here next year for SharePoint Fest 2019. So those are some things I want to have on your radar. And now, good.
Was the date correct for this one? I think it's Saturday, February 2nd.
Have to double check that. It should be the first Thursday of February. It might be the 7th then. I have to double check that.
7th, you're right.
I'll correct that in the slide in the post. Okay, so let's move on to our panel. As you can see before you, let's start with, well, these don't map out quite correctly, so why don't we start with Asif. Go ahead, start introducing yourself and work our way down the line.
Microphone, no microphone, doesn't matter. All right, so I'm a local Chicagoan, Asif Rahmani. Thank you very much, Michael, Larry, Rich, for having me here. I actually went to the meeting last time too. I saw you guys there. You guys are wonderful job. Thank you very much for doing that. Can we give a round of applause for all that stuff you're doing? Thank you very much. My name is Asif Ramani, like I said, from Chicago. And I have fallen in love with end users and trying to support end users to really get them using what we have developed. We've been trying to get them to use for so long, but I come from a background of development, and then administration, then power user training, and now I'm in end users. And I gotta tell you that all the stuff that I have done in the past is worth nothing if no one is actually using it. So this is super, super important topic, and I'm so glad that Microsoft is finally waking up and talking about this much more often, last couple of years. So thanks, good to be here.
I'm just going to stay seated.
You don't have to do anything.
I'm Stephanie Donahue, and I own a company called Pay Group out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And I spend a lot of my time doing Office 365 and SharePoint strategy and deployment planning, trying to understand how end users work and how to get them into Office 365. So do a lot of mapping from what the business need is to the technology and helping to explain it in a way that end users can understand. So that's my day-to-day job.
I'm Sue Hanley, and I have my own consulting practice, and I spend my time focused on helping people adopt technology and use it effectively. So I'm basically all SharePoint all the time, and I'm an information architect and business analyst, sort of by training and profession, and spend a lot of time focused on governance, IA, adoption, training, all that kind of stuff.
Rick?
Rick Sabatino. I'm a manager in the Operations Excellence practice at West Monroe Partners, and for about the past 15 or so years, I've been focused on organizational development and organizational change management, and doing a lot more around effective adoption of the SharePoint Office 365 tools, recognizing that you pay whatever per user per month, but it quickly adds up to nearing $1 million a year for a lot of companies, and 100% of that return on investment is dependent on people using it in a productive way. And I've been an end user in a lot of organizations where I've seen it done poorly, and been subject to the misery of Office 365 rolled out poorly. And so, big advocate of how do you create those norms for collaboration and shared responsibility, and how do you drive that into your organization and the behavior that goes with the technology.
Hi, I'm Stacy Gearstroll. I own a company called Focal Point Solutions out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And pretty much what we do is SharePoint, regardless if it's on-prem, in the cloud, with a huge focus on making sure it's done by best practice, done the right way, and stressing the fact that a project is not successful just because it's on time and under budget. It's successful if people are actually using it. So user adoption to me is if you only get 50% user adoption, you're only 50% successful.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to get some prepared questions here, but if other people here in the audience have questions for the panel, please raise your hand and let us know, and we'll bring you a mic. My first question is, what does user adoption mean to you? How do you define what user adoption is? Let's start with Stacy.
To me, user adoption is actually using what has been implemented in the best way possible to make an impact for your organization.
For me, user adoption has to start back with what's your vision for why are you using these tools in the first place? Because they were bundled with, you wanted one of the tools and you got all of them bundled, or is there actually a business result you want to drive? And so adoption is when the stakeholders, the people in your business, choose to think and act in a way consistent with what you envisioned for the future and with what's going to get you the return on investment, the business results you want. And until you have that behavioral change, you don't have adoption, even if your application is rolled out. Sue?
I mean, same flavor. I guess for me, user adoption is kind of a weird term, because adopting what? It's people using technology effectively to solve business problems. And at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about.
How do you add all that?
If you feel it's complete, it's complete.
Yeah, I think we're good. I mean, I think it's a general feeling, right?
I love it that you put me last. As all the good answers are
Yes.
gone already.
So,
Yeah.
I've learned that if it starts that way, I'm just saying ditto.
Right.
Sounds good.
So I'll start with Asif then.
But I didn't answer the question. Here's the thing, there's one example that I always give, and I think I gave it in my session. I know a few of you guys came to the session, thanks very much for coming. And I talk about this thing, like my dad. He just was not into smartphones when they first came out, and for years, and I could not get him to do it. But it was just that one application, WhatsApp in his case, that got him into it. And I didn't force him at all. It was just all of our family was there, and he wanted to be there. So he got the smartphone because of that one application. You got to find that one application. I don't mean an actual application, but one scenario. That's it. It's not going to be how many people how much are they using SharePoint or Office 365, is how much they're adopting at least one scenario. I think I actually learned that from you. So you mentioned that in one of the webinars when you came to our user group also, the online one. There's just got to be how much do you love that at least one or two scenarios that's going to get you back into using it.
Okay. Well, so how is user adoption different this year than when we talked about it last year? Is it different?
You mean user adoption of technologies that we're dealing with? Or?
Yeah, of Office 365.
Yeah.
What's different about this year versus when we made last year?
I think there's a lot more awareness, that's for sure. And that's what I was saying before. I was thanking Microsoft because honestly, this challenge has always been there. This is not something new that we're just waking up to say, oh yeah, user adoption is a problem now. It's always been a problem. Since I entered in 2002, I saw SharePoint 2001, which sucked obviously at that time. But even then, it was like, oh, well, we just need to for one little thing. And the adoption was not there. Challenges have not changed. The awareness has risen over the years, and I'm thankful for that.
I think the pace continues to get faster and faster. So as the technology changes and the things that they need to know and learn are, we're even amongst speakers, we are also trying to keep up with those changes and learning and really, being able to take advantage of the things that are put in front of us. And so user adoption in the past used to mean we could roll something out, and then 3 years later we'd worry about it again, learning new things. We'd learn, all the upgrades. And now it's user adoption happens every day because you're not just doing it once, you're doing it over and over in an effort to continue to build on what you've done. So it's, for me, I think it's the pace that's really dramatically faster year to year.
Yeah, what they said.
Anything there?
Yeah, I'll add. One of the pieces I think that's changing about adoption is you're losing more and more control over it. For an example, I logged in, and I don't often log in on the web interface, but I logged into the Outlook web app, and I got a prompt. I got an email that had me tagged with an ad, and I got a prompt. Hey, you've been tagged with an ad. We can add this to your to-do list. Would you like us to do that? And so I said, yeah, sure, why not? I got an email the next day from Michael. Hey, I see you've started using Microsoft Flow. Is there like a business case? Like, is there a reason you want to start using it? I'm like, huh? I started using Microsoft Flow? So Microsoft is driving the adoption with this prompt, and you don't know about it, right? And now you've got users that are getting into Flow, and you've got to stay on top of this. So now you're using Flow. How do I want to use this? Do I want this used in the business? And so Michael and I had an initial, Michael's like, oh, okay. And he didn't know that feature was going to pop, and so we did a test and figured out, okay, we're going to need to prepare our users for this or help them through this. And, the day before, we didn't have an idea that this was even something we were going to be dealing with. And so adoption's changing at a pace that is going to be really hard to keep up with.
So I actually have something to add, oddly enough, right? So my thing is they're absolutely correct. It's changing like daily. I mean, they may have a new release that goes out on Tuesday, but you might not get it until Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. The problem is because the awareness is so much higher now, so is the frustration that things are changing every single day. And we have to not only keep up with that change, but find ways to keep the users less frustrated so that they continue to want to use it. And that's the hard part.
Yeah, it isn't adoption that's changing, it's the pace of change of the technology. And what that means is that we have to be aware from a change management perspective and I think it's the pace of change. There's nothing about adoption that has fundamentally changed in the last year, in the last 30 years that I've been a consultant. The whole idea and what's different about the cloud and what's really different about SharePoint over the past year is that because the pace of change has been so dramatic, mostly in response to all of the things we've been asking Microsoft to do, we now need to be aware of the impact on change of our users and how that feels, like Stacey said, to be sort of getting these changes that happen all the time. Over the weekend, I had to update every single one of my slide decks for this conference, and I was just presenting the same things last week. So, because things hit my tenant on Thursday.
So, we've got a question. That's good. Let's give you the microphone.
Two different type of questions. One is about the change. How are you staying on top of that? Or are you just being surprised when it happens? Second is only using a document library of folders in a SharePoint site successful?
So why don't we take the second question first, and answer the question about is using just the document library a measure of success, and then we'll go back to how do you stay on top of it.
Well, he was asking the question about folders specifically, folder usage in document libraries. Is that what you said?
Well, I mean, probably 80% of the sites that are used in my environment, the only usage is the document library, and then they organize everything with their folders.
You gotta turn that folder thing off. I'm just saying.
Do you want to join the panel?
What we do with get more service that's bigger. Why can't I click the button?
Because you're not supposed to. You need to try.
So, I should throw it back to you. Why aren't you supposed to use folders?
Do you want the message that on your file share in SharePoint?
Do you want to exceed the character limit when you try to click on something?
Here's the reason I asked this is because I've seen people actually lose interest when they couldn't do what to do before.
Then you're
in
not
here.
teaching them right. You gotta train them to use metadata. They can have one document in many different views.
Sounds like us.
I just want to stop here. First of all, folders are not evil. They are not the
Yes,
F
there's
word.
a place for them. I will agree.
One level of folders is what people are used to. It is a metaphor that has worked for a really long time. If you try to break that habit without a really good business reason, you are going to drive people away from the tool and off to the D word.
And I've seen that, absolutely.
And so one level of folders, maybe two. And you're not going to kill any kittens. Nested folders, however, more than 3, a kitten dies for every time you nest a folder.
As a dog lover, that's no, I'm just kidding.
Well, but I would encourage you to also just think about it a little differently. Like, who cares if they use folders? Who cares if they use Teams? Who cares if they use SharePoint? And I'm being a little contrary on purpose. You only care, like, is there a business return on that? And is there a cost to them using folders? We were just talking before the panel, I've taken lately more of a stance of rolling out behaviors. And in fact, I don't recommend governing Office 365, but creating, if you want to talk about collaboration, let's create a collaboration council that governs collaboration in our organization. And it might be Office 365, it might not, and it might have different pieces, but let's talk about what that behavior is. In the past, there's been a lot of decisions made on the IT side about what technology to use, how it should be used. It's kind of a very paternalistic approach to IT. And in a lot of organizations, you see resentment building because IT and shared services, they're not working on the front line of the business. I work in an organization where our front line is a lot of IT experts. And we even see that tension in the organization. It's like, what is the behavior we want to drive? What's the way we want to collaborate? Start there, and if it means we use folders, if a document repository is business success, then let's plant that flag and declare victory.
I was going to say, I think the question that was asked was, and it goes back to your statement during the very first question, was what are they trying to accomplish? And if they do, then it's successful. So I think that question goes back to you. Is that what you wanted SharePoint for?
I think it's a lot of overhead.
Okay. So I'm not a huge proponent of folders. There's a time and a place, and there are companies that have to use them. I also say no more than 1-2 levels if that's a need. The main thing is if you have a company that is willing to make the change and get rid of folders because you've shown them a better way to do it using the metadata and how it improves their search and their day-to-day business, that's a win. But you're not always going to get that, so you have to fight the battles that you can win and kind of let some things go. But the thing I have with folders, if you say, yeah, folders are okay, the problem that you typically run into is they don't stop at 1 or 2. They just keep going and keep going. And there has to be, you have to set some limits, and that kind of goes back to the governance. What are you going to allow and what are you not going to allow? Because SharePoint's not a file, it's not a file share.
And I think Microsoft has helped by giving us that hard limit, right? All right, did we get the answer to your question? You had 2 questions. What was it? Did you get both of them?
Sitting down the changes.
Okay, so
in front of them.
Right. So that one, I'll say that the way that I think one of the key tools for staying on top of what's coming to your tenant is the Office 365 Message Center and the Weekly Digest. So you have to be an admin or have an account that's been given message reader permissions to get to that. But once you have that, then Microsoft will send you a weekly update, a weekly summary of all the things that are all their change announcements in the last 7 days. I make a habit of reading that every Monday morning and then distributing it to my IT peers who are affected by different things.
And to echo that real quick, and we'll get to our next question. We have a group of engineers and technicians that go through that every Monday afternoon to find out what's coming and start mapping out so that we work with our change management on things that need to be addressed, you know, and things that we can just ignore. So.
Yeah, so I will add to that. In the Message Center, one of the key things is if you go out there, there's a lot of content, a lot of information, and all of it may not be relevant to you. The thing I like about the Message Center is you can configure to what you want to know about. So if you only focus on the SharePoint side of it, you can just get the messages that relate to SharePoint, so that can be your focus. If there's someone who deals with Exchange, they can get the Exchange stuff and so on. That way you're not trying to put it all in your head and disperse it out.
I don't think that's the only place. That's one of several places you should be tracking. So the blogs on Tech Community are going to give you a much earlier roadmap to what's possibly coming. By the time it's in the Message Center, it's rolling out. But you really need to know about it a little before then to know approximately what you're going to get so that you can, you know, when people are demanding things, you can make really good business decisions about should I try and customize or should I wait for it. Yeah. So I think paying attention to the blogs in the tech community, and you can subscribe to them as well in an RSS reader, that's another easy place to sort of get a clue about what's coming.
And so there's a blog aggregator, Collab 365, that sends me a daily digest of all the new blogs. That's one. I follow a bunch of SharePoint and Office related things on Twitter, and as well as LinkedIn. So social media helps me stay on top of the announcements, helps me pay attention to the blogs. The roadmap is out there, but it's not necessarily as actionable. The other one is events like this. I mean, Chris McNulty's keynote, the keynote they give at SharePoint Conference, the keynote they give at Microsoft Ignite. Those are key messages. Those are your early alerts. Those are where they lay out the product roadmap. So you want to watch those, you want to digest those, and that's one of your best guidance to what's ahead.
And I'm going to make a plug for Microsoft because I've been asking for this for years along with others. Is a lot of the things they're rolling out now, they're actually giving you the option to turn it off initially so that you can turn it on when you're ready, which is something they've just started doing. So thank you, Larry. All right, next question.
Just quickly to piggyback on that is it might say in the message center that it's coming, but that doesn't mean I have an idea in my tenant when it's going to hit. And that is a really, really open end. And the best way I can come up with it is to say, well, the last time they said it was coming, it took another 6 months before I saw it. But that's not a very clean way to do it. So a little more information on that line. But my question has to do with kind of the folder part. With all of the discussion about how much foldering or any foldering in anything like that, I was surprised to see that in the Teams that the site list is created with folders for the channels automatically and not for different libraries. And I would just like to know, just to help me understand the logic and the reason behind that, if anybody can speak to that.
Product team?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we can take forward.
Right, I mean, I don't really know exactly what they're thinking, but I can tell you that for the most part, in team sites, that is how folders are being used. You have one document library, and teams tend to put their content in different folders in that library. I think it's actually mimicking the actual real behavior. And so one of the things I find the most annoying, first of all, and then again, I started out by saying folders are not evil. Get over it. You're going to get them in Microsoft Teams, whether you like them or not. And if you ever tried to sync anything offline, you're going to wish you had folders if you have a very, very large library. So I think they're partially anticipating that. One thing I didn't like about it is that if you're in the SharePoint view of Microsoft Teams, you don't know which of the folders in that default document library are connected to Teams. That is actually changing. So that if you're in a folder on the SharePoint side, you can see, hey, does this belong to a channel? The next thing they have to do is make sure if I change the name of the channel, it changes the name of the folder. That is coming. So when those are, it's still not perfect, but this is why you can't say, don't use folders. It's not realistic.
Yeah, the syncing, that's helpful. I haven't thought about that.
Well, and I think that the key here is that it is evolving, right? If we look at where Teams is today compared to where it was a year ago, and some of the things that we may have said needed to be fixed a year ago, a lot of those have been fixed. So tune in next year, right?
Right. At least you can now see your metadata. If you're using metadata, that used to be really bad, and that's better.
You know, I'm also seeing folders as being what I call a stabilization anchor for people. When you're asking them to make a big change, organizational change, there needs to be some stability. If you just say change everything, someone was teaching me this actually this afternoon at our booth, saying, you know what, fold your hands this way, all right? What thumb is on top? For me, it's the right. Now try to do it this way. Left is on top. Now keep on doing it this way. I don't want to. Why should I? Right? It's like why. The why is very important. There's got to be some stability. So first start with why, and also have some stability anchors. Folders I actually see as one of those stability anchors where, as Sue were saying before, and others I think agree, that if you have some leeway, then all right, you can keep one, maybe two levels. But then here's other stuff that I need you to do. For example, add metadata every time you're adding a document, and you make that a required property. And maybe you make a view on the document library which is without folders, and that could be the default view. So there are some give and take. This cannot just be take. You have to give, otherwise it will just resist and resist.
So make sure we're all making sure that the folders are not easy. Another question here.
This goes a little bit back to staying apprised of what's going on and the different ways that we can get information about what's coming out. Specifically, disruptive technology. There was a time when everybody had a MySpace account, and we all knew how to, format our MySpaces, and that's kind of a, we have Facebook now. Right now, we're putting a lot of effort into SharePoint, and is there people out there that are looking at disruptive technologies that might, 5 years from now, what's a SharePoint site? Is that something that people are actually talking about, or is this something that's just really not even relevant?
Well, I'm going to look historically and say that the most recent disruptive technology that we've had is Teams.
I was going to say, is there anything Microsoft is coming out?
Who's got it? That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So the question is, what's the next disruptor after Teams? I don't know that I don't know that we know yet, but I would say that the community is the best way to find out. I think the people here, many of us are in the MVP community, and we hear things from Microsoft first, and to the extent that Microsoft is doing that disruption, we'll hear about it first. However, Microsoft often is reactive, and so I would say just look around in the industry and leverage the community, contribute to the community, participate in the community. I think that's where you're going to find out the soonest what the next disruptor might be.
If you think about SharePoint, oh, sorry.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I wanted to touch on that disruptor piece though, because I think that there's in this room there's probably a fatigue and a skepticism, like how much am I going to invest in this? Because is it going to be disrupted before I can even really effectively roll it out?
Yeah.
And that's a good point of view to keep in mind, because guess what? Your users are sick of it too. And you're not, like, if you think about as business moves more and more to SaaS, Office 365 isn't the only one hitting them with this. And the constant change, and what was on the left side of the page is now on the right side of the page. And the more you can do to stonewall disruption, to give your users a chance to stabilize, and the fact that Microsoft is giving you the ability to turn some things off for a while, control the pace of change. You take control of the pace of change wherever you can, because not every change is. Not every change isn't bad, but not every change is necessary. And so, be strategic in what you're forcing your users to adopt, because change saturation is really real on a day-to-day basis in a lot of organizations that we're looking at. And I'm seeing user groups that they've got so much change coming outside that they're having trouble getting a handle on the change that they're trying to enact strategically in the organization. And that's important wherever you can do it, because you're right. It's the next disruptor isn't far off, and you can get really caught on shiny objects and actually accelerate the disruption in your organization.
How many of us are IT people? Because we love shiny objects. Right? Did you want to?
I was going to just say that if you think about SharePoint, you started out with SharePoint, Andrew, right? If you think about SharePoint, it's 18 years old now, isn't it? 18, 19 years old. It's an adult. It's an adult, right? And as an adult, that it has grown up now, finally gone through the puberty and the teenage and all that stuff. Yeah, pretty soon it'll be able to drink in 3 years. It's becoming more of a support product for other children now, where teams and other places are actually hosting files and everything else within SharePoint. Other things are hosted in SharePoint or surfaced in SharePoint. So it is becoming a lot more mature technology than it has been. And I think that's going to continue. Do we know if it's going to be around after 10 years? I don't know. I don't think anybody can tell.
Or if it'll be called.
Or if it'll be called SharePoint or something. Yeah, we don't know. It was called Sites for a long time, wasn't it?
Teams documents or something, right?
Yeah. At the end of the technology and the collaboration, will that be there? Yes. In one way, shape, or form, absolutely it's going to be there. What is it going to be called? What it's called right now? No idea. No idea.
And I think one other big thing, putting the genie back in the bottle isn't going to happen soon, right?
Yeah.
So what do you see working well in the workplace today in terms of training? So, I think historically, when there was longer time frames, people would build a big training plan and schedule everybody to get trained on the new product and whatever. And so pace of change disrupts that approach. What do you see working for end user training now?
Where we've had the most success is the in-person, hands-on, whatever you can do to get them exposed to it in line with the rollout. So get their hands on it as soon as possible after they've gone through the training session. Train the trainers, create some kind of support system for everyone else. But I think our days of having 5 days of training in a room, in its silo just doesn't happen anymore. And it has to be ongoing. So you can't just do it once, but you have to go back and revisit it over time and make sure that you're knocking down the barriers that are in their way.
Sending people to a training class for 2 days never worked actually when we did it. Because by the time you get back to your office, you've forgotten everything you've learned in that training class. The only successful
My
training
previous
approach.
career was a waste.
Pardon me?
I spent 12 years as a trainer.
So the only thing that ever really works is learning at the time that you're ready to learn something. So just in time, at the moment that you need to know something is actually the best way to deliver it also.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
So we do a lot of, so when we do our training, one of the things that we try to focus on is actually doing it in their look and feel of their environment, so then when they walk out of the training session, they go back to their desk, they see exactly what they just saw in the training, so they know all that, so it's very easy for them. What we've also done is real quick 2-minute, 3-minute little videos of how-to items and that they can go out to and revisit.
Good.
But the other piece of training is just stop training people on technology. Train people to solve problems and use technology as the tool. As you're like my mom and dad at Home Depot, my dad's just drooling over this, whatever DeWalt just released last week, and my mom's like, "What are you going to do with it?" It's like, but it's great, and I already have the batteries because it's the same. You've got to train them to solve a problem. Like you've got a hammer, great, but are you going to build a bookcase? What are you going to do with it?
But
focus on that.
Yeah. I'm going to take a little bit different take on it. I completely agree with Just in Time, by the way. I wonder why. Wonder why.
Sorry, what is your company? No.
Yes. In the beginning, I started out being a developer trainer. So I was a developer myself, and I got into SharePoint. I was making web parts, customizing site themes, all kinds of stuff. Right? Then I went from developer training to administrator training to power user training to end users. And developers, administrators, I had lots of success with. They actually wanted to learn. They wanted to come and they grasped a lot of stuff and they were really appreciative. Power users also, with SharePoint Designer InfoPath, I did a lot of stuff, as you know, right, back in the day. But end users, oh my God, I've had so many failures with end user training. And I actually even had a session with somebody, some of the people called me and I was like, how can you even say that? Because I said, my title of the session was, Training SharePoint End Users is a Waste of Time. And they're like, what? You're a trainer, how can you say that?
Right?
Huh?
That's the one they wanted to show up for.
Here's the thing, I realize, and I could be wrong, and I'm definitely open for a challenge over here, that end users don't really care to be trained. They just want to get their job done. They don't want to be trained, they want to be helped. They want to be helped, like, you know what, can you show me how to do this? And that's it, go away after that. Don't train me, I just need to get help and then be done.
And as part of our adoption, and again, I spent many years as a Microsoft and another company certified trainer. First of all, making your own training videos, a waste of time today. When we did our rollout, we spent a lot of time, and I created 30, 40 hours of training on SharePoint, Outlook, OneDrive, and a month later they changed the interface, and we had to throw it all out because it is significantly different. So I don't recommend creating long training videos, right? If you are going to create them, create the short snippets, and to your point, make it very task-oriented. Somebody wants to know how to create a rule in Outlook, create a 1-minute video on how to create a rule in Outlook. If you have to replace it, right? It's 1 minute. The other thing is, and I'm going to plug this, is find a vendor, Microsoft or another vendor, and make use of their videos because they will spend the time to keep them updated. Why should you have to update your own videos when there's people out there that you can pay, or in the case of Microsoft, just use their videos for that?
Microsoft's doing a great job these days also. They're making some great content that's never happened before. Now it's like 2 minutes.
And they're keeping it up to date.
And they're keeping it up to date.
Right, which is a lot more than, so we started taking our videos down and linking to Microsoft in our training centers.
Can I ask more question of the panel in the room? Are you seeing more problems with users knowing where to click and what the procedural steps are in the interface? Or are you seeing more problems with getting them to adopt the norms and patterns that you want in the organization? Kind of the decisions you've made around configuration of Office 365?
I think it depends on what they're going in. So I mean, like if I have a user that's trying to play the new modern view, they have no idea where to click to find what they're looking for because they're so used to where everything is in the classic view and they expect it to work the same way and things are just a lot different. So in that aspect, they just don't know where to go. But moreover, I mean, other than that, they tend to find it pretty easy to work around everything. It seems very intuitive, but that's the only thing I've really seen, just on the modern sites with execution.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we make a business out of helping end users in Visual SB. Modern is different. Classic is different. Things are changing all the time, and I think Rich said it well. The genie is not going back in the bottle. But we're just used to having, the 3-year cycles, and now we're going into this thing, which, as a company, for example, we've been users of HubSpot and Salesforce for a long time. For marketing, for sales, and stuff like that. And we're used to change over there, things changing, interface changing, objects changing, all that stuff, and we live with it. But now that I'm seeing within SharePoint, most of us are not ready for it, unfortunately, but it's not going back in the bottle. It's going to continue to happen. Who mentioned that there's actually a feature where you can turn off certain things? Okay. I was not aware of it. I'm so glad that that's happening, because so many of people that I talk to are asking about that wait, can we stop this waterfall for a second?
Well, I'm not on Office 365, so I don't know about that. I'm not trying to.
Some of the new features
Some
are.
of them,
Okay.
yeah, not always.
Turn it off.
It just adds so much stress to the people that I talk to. Like, you know what, my job has tenfold done bigger just to keep up with the changes that are coming in. And what if I don't want something? It could be really cool, but it just adds more stress to my work. Like, have you guys seen in SharePoint Online, on the bottom left, it says, try Microsoft Teams? I know so many people complain. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Pop-up small, like?
My problem is with the whole Teams trial.
And the trial also. I mean, we use Teams all the time. Teams is awesome, Microsoft. But you can't be pushing stuff on things. That's where it becomes very difficult. People say, you know what, can we just stop this for a second so we can catch up to it before.
And believe me, every 2 months I put my comments, that's why I told them.
It's a recurring theme of discussion at our regular meetings, yeah.
So I just saw a brand new tenant over the weekend that it literally almost had a list, just like this is what made me think about it, where you could actually turn the features on and off what you want to use.
Got a question to that now? And then we'll get up to you.
I have a question around your experience around governing the presentation of content. I think there's 2 things that stand out to me in terms of the flexibility that users have now to customize and augment a page very freely, while a company wants to control the presentation of content and the flexibility that it is, and the clashing maybe of controlling presentation while allowing users to freely customize a page. And then the shift between, I think, the presentation layer, which is your page and your web parts and the presentation, to the storage of content. And one of the things I've noticed is that there's more and more web parts that capture content that's directly stored at the page level. So you now are creating links, creating content that's actually stored at the page level, not inside of lists, where you can kind of separate that. So what is your experience with that? How do you suggest governance around that? And why this shift in the way content is stored?
All right.
I think the why is a Microsoft question. I don't know. From a governance perspective, which is something I really care about, we are getting a gift, which is the ability to have a page design. And so having that page design will give us a little bit closer to what people liked about Classic, is that you could give people a layout and just fill in the buckets. And so that is coming. So today we have something that's very convenient, which is make a copy of a page. So you can have some degree of control of structure that way. But what is coming, literally in a hot minute, like check your tenant every day, is page templates, just like we just got document templates. That isn't really the kind of structure that you may be looking for, but honestly, I find that the structure of Classic pages is not always the best case. And what we really ought to be doing is educating our users on how to create great experiences writing content for the web. And the idea is the content should tell the story, and the layout of the page should reflect the content, the story that you're trying to create on that page, I'd rather invest some time in teaching people how to create good experiences on the web, and that way I don't have to worry so much about putting page content in rigid boxes when in fact the content doesn't lay out that way. The content doesn't want to be told in that kind of a story.
What about the second part? I'm just curious your thoughts on the separation of the presentation. I'm thinking things like quick links, for example.
Yep.
If you want to add quick links now, the traditional way would have been you go to a list somewhere and update that and adjust the order and those things, and you can separate the storage of content and presentation. Now you have to have access to the page to edit something like adding a quick link.
So I can just give you a little bit of history. So at one of my clients, Shire, we created all those different ways to display those quick links in a custom web part 18 months ago, before Microsoft did that. We always had the quick links, but we wanted to have buttons and icons and all that kind of stuff. We, in our design, created a way to list back the links web part so that you could actually have a list. And do you know that about 99% of our users do not use a list? We know we need it when you want to repeat the list on multiple pages. Then it's super handy to have a list backing those links. But 99% of our end users, when they're creating a story on their page, are really carefully crafting the links, and they're not using that capability that we have for them. On the more complex solutions, if I have a designer working on it, they will. But it's very interesting to see that people aren't necessarily using that capability. Microsoft does all their design based on telemetry, so they know what you're using, and they can see whether or not that capability is part of, and I don't know whether that actually impacted how they designed it, but it's just, they know what you're doing.
One of the things I've seen is a change in our company, just as a note, is that we have less SharePoint designers and more web page designers working on SharePoint sites.
There you go.
And because of the ability to do that customized. So supporting what you're saying is that, and actually West Monroe Partners has done a lot of work on that for us. So. But anyway, you have one last question from the audience, and then Michael, I think, has one last.
I have one
final, and then we'll do our wrap.
Okay, so thank you. So mine is a two-parter as well. Apparently, they always are. So first thing is user adoption. To me, feels like what do people feel when they sit down in front of their system or whatever the tool is? They feel good. They feel not good. And I think it does align back with is it helping them to do their job or not? But really, even deeper is do they feel it's helping them? So I welcome you to sort of agree, disagree, or discuss that. And then the second part is specifically around different roles. And I'm thinking mostly of the executive. If there's any tips, we know stuff runs downhill. Are there any specific user adoption tips to get that top level adopting your snazzy new systems?
Get their admin.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, so we have, the second question there, we had a global manufacturing company that we had been working about a year trying to get them into Office 365. Executives weren't having it. We don't need to put a new roof on an old barn. That's a silly thing. They looked at SharePoint as being just another intranet with a different branding, right? So what ended up happening was there was a company that they modeled themselves after, and they found a case study that this company had posted, and that company had fixed their quality issues out in the manufacturing plants by uploading videos into 365 video, sharing them globally, and being able to collaborate around that. All of a sudden, boom, executives on board to, you brought this up earlier, that one thing, find what matters to them and their bottom line is impacted by quality. That's where your executives come in. That's powerful. That's exactly what they need to hear. It's not always that easy or straightforward, but if you can find it, they'll be on board.
I call that the when Harry met Sally approach. I'll have what she's having.
What I always find out is interesting too is if you can show them within their own organization their return on an investment through a process that's been streamlined or whatever, they're all about that mighty dollar, right? So if you can prove and show to them how much they're going to get on their return on investment, they're a lot happier.
A cornerstone of our methodology is to have the executives define a vision and then lay out the business value. So it might be that adoption is defined, they can define adoption very differently, but what is that value? How are we going to measure the achievement of that vision? And we push them for that, like, what's your vision for this investment, and what's your return going to look like? And we measure to that, and that helps drive, that really makes it real in front of them, and they can see some numbers. And if they can't come up with a vision, well, then you question the investment before you start.
Okay. Leva? All right, Michael,
Okay.
you get the last question.
So for in conclusion, what is one resource that you would recommend to learn more about user adoption? Start with Hassan.
Visualspeak.com.
Yeah.
So biased,
You can list your own credentials.
So biased. I don't think you can learn user adoption. I don't think, at least. It's more about, I need to understand my user. What's in it for Michael, you know? And if I understand Michael, if I can empathize, truly empathize with him, what he wants, then I got it covered.
So is there a process or approach that you would recommend for
ask them? Most people don't ask their users, you know, what is it that they want?
In a large organization, we've got hundreds or thousands of users. You can't ask all of them. How do you address
There's
that?
always a sampling. So one of the things that I always see, I don't know if you guys see that in every department, in every company, there's influencers, there's champions, there's evangelists. They're almost mimicking, and everybody's almost following. You know, hey, we all ask Sarah anytime we have a question, anytime we want a macro Excel or something like that. Ask Sarah.
Okay.
All right? Ask those key people what is their need. If they are on your side, oh man, you're going to get everybody else just like that. But it's very much about asking and then actually doing.
I think I'd probably lean towards community as being a really great way, not just to know what's coming and to get basic tips on adoption, but what works for others in your industry, being able to go out and get ideas from other people. I do that all week here at this conference. I learn probably twice as much as I can learn on my own because I know what's important to the people that I'm interacting with and how it impacts them. So I think that's a great way to get a lot of content more quickly and to have the context behind it as well.
So I'll go old school. So Michael Sampson wrote a phenomenally great book on user adoption. And it's a couple of years old, but honestly, I think it's still a great resource for something to read that is really, it's extremely well written, and there's lots of really, really good ideas in it. I think it's just called User Adoption.
A paper book?
Yeah.
That's the old book? Paper book, right?
It's a paper book, by the way.
Yeah. Actual physical book.
If you haven't yet, I would study up on Scrum product ownership and think about what it takes to be a product owner with an agile product. And there's development paths you can take around that, but that starts getting at how do you bring in your stakeholder input, and then how do you drive adoption? How do you drive adoption of your product out? Because that's what ultimately a product owner is on the hook for. And if you can take that internally and start cultivating those practices and driving that behavior change, that's a place to look and start adopting those practices.
So you asked that question, the only thing that came to mind was another question. And ultimately is, well, what users are you trying to get the adoption from? Because if you're talking about the everyday worker, I don't think you're going to get them to go read a book on user adoption. I don't think you're going to get them to...
No, I'm not asking them to read it.
I'm not asking
No, but I'm saying, but that's the question that comes to my mind is, those are the people that we ultimately want to be using it.
Right.
So the goal is like they said, is to hit the people that actually care and are going to embrace it, and then use them as your tool.
Okay. And I'll add one more resource to that, which is that at Microsoft, Caruana Gatimu runs a monthly champions call about user adoption. And I found that very valuable, and don't know the shortcut to register for it, but I'm sure you can Bing for that. And so I would recommend calling into that once a month. Okay, so let's give a round of applause to our panel. Thank you very much.